All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today's guest is very special. It's actually my older brother, David Lewin. And if you've been in sales for any length of time, you tend to have to take this kind of me first approach where you're pushing your products. And that's kind of the way that a lot of people think about sales is how do I have as many conversations as possible about what I do and my products and my services, and really being a lot of times product first and really trying to push your products into the market. But what I love about David and his approach and how it's shaped my view of sales is that he's really looked for ways to be able to serve other people and look for ways to be able to add as much value as possible. And then I've been doing podcasting for a while, but one of the first shows that I helped to kick off was David's show, This Week in Drones. And it's really become an amazing tool for him to be able to take that philosophy of serving other people first and amplify it significantly. So, David, I'm super excited to talk to you. Your show's been an incredible success. I'm really excited to dive into this with you today.
Come on. Appreciate it, Joe. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man.
I remember that microphone, the nice gold one from back in the day when we used to try to record music together out of our house and funny videos.
I always get comments on this mic and I'm like, it's really just the one that I had. I didn't want to spend any money, so I've made it work. It's actually a pretty old mic, but right. Yeah, man, I'm super excited to talk to you about this because you really embody this because you're in a sales role. And I think what's been really amazing is to see how you've been able to position yourself, and people don't really see you as a salesperson because you're not just pushing this product, right? And that's beneficial both for you as a salesperson because you're building amazing relationships with people who could buy and people with influence. But it's also great for the people you're working with because you're there as a helpful resource. You're there to build connections within the community that you're working in. So I'd love for you to just outline a little bit about your philosophy around sales.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, look, when you first start out in a sales role, or even when you first start out at a new job, or like if I, whenever I jump into a new company or start selling a new product, activity is and getting enough conversations with people like you talked about before is always key, right? You're not worth your salt in sales if you're not focused on having a really high number of conversations to find out who exactly could buy your product and who's a good fit and who your ideal customer is that you can serve. So I can never downplay that per se in terms of just pure activity levels being the kind of the baseline where you start. However, I think as I've grown as a person, as I've matured, as I've become sort of less sort of desperate or frantic or whatever, just become more established in my career, financially, otherwise in my product, I've been able to start to kind of shift that mentality and embrace a mindset of serving others as opposed to looking at a new conversation as a transaction, running into somebody at a conference and going, hey, how can this person possibly buy from me, as my first thought, transitioning away from that towards, how is this person, like, who is this person and what did they bring to the table and what do they think about? What do they care about? What are they working on? What are they trying to accomplish? And then marrying those two together becomes a powerhouse, a flywheel effect when it comes to sales. Because I think you can definitely go too far the other way as well. People who want to get into sales and they talk to me and they say, man, I just love networking with people. I love talking to people and I love listening to their story. If that's where they stop, I know in my head, okay, they're not going to survive in sales because you actually do have to know how to, close the deal and like bring the conversation to talk about money, to talk about like hard things that, a lot of like pure networking folks don't want to do that because that could kind of hurt the relationship. So it's this unique convergence of those two sides. And yeah, podcasting, which we can get into in a bit, has become an incredible source of, or a kind of platform for all that to happen on steroids, really. But
yeah, and what we're going to get into some stories and into the podcasting, but I like kind of laying the foundation with the philosophy first, but I don't want to stay here the whole time because it really comes alive when we start talking about different stories. But you and I have always kind of gone back and forth like sales and marketing, right? Because I've been primarily in more marketing roles, and at different times I've been in some sales roles as well. And then I've helped to introduce you to some marketing ideas like podcasting. And what I love is that we both kind of come closer to each other's point of view on building value, building brand, building reputation, and all of those things, and then marrying that to, look, it still is a numbers game no matter what. There's only so many people who are going to be in market for what you have. There's only so many people at any given time. And so you do have to have a volume of activity. You have to have a volume of conversations. You need to build relationships, not just with 3 or 4 people, but with, tens of people, or even, 100 plus people in your industry, and be keeping in relationship with them and keeping them, keeping yourself in the loop with them. And if you're not constantly doing that and having that activity, you're not going to be in a position to actually get the business that when it's there. Right.
Exactly. I mean, I hear people, a philosophy that I think really helps is like, you want to keep people warm. You want to keep the relationship with them warm until their buying window opens. And in sales, like I typically am involved in, they're longer, they're a longer sales cycle. Maybe it takes 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even further. My
Yep.
CRO joked the other day, because I had a deal on my pipeline for Q4 here coming up that's like 400 days old or whatever, or more. It might have been like 900 days old or something crazy. And he's like, this might not be the number one record of oldest deal, created in the system that hasn't closed yet, but we're getting close. And anyway, point being, like, it came back around $1 million deal, that I have just kept warm, over time. And then finally, boom, hey, funding's here. It wasn't here before, last year, the year before, but it is now. Let's move forward. And so now actually become something. And my point of saying that is, it's important to find tools, thus like podcasting being an incredible tool to stay top of mind, to keep that relationship warm, where if you don't have those kind of tools, all you're left with as a salesperson is the annoying pestering, hey, are you going to buy this yet or not? And that doesn't go over so well, right? I mean, I've done plenty of that in my day. And sometimes you just have to, just kind of like, well, I'm going to find out where this is at. I'm going to send them an email or whatever. But I mean, it is what it is, but it's a lot less effective. If I have to send, 17 touch points, and they're all one-line email asking, are you ready to buy from me today or not? No. Okay. I'll get back to you again, in 60 days. Hey, are you ready to buy from me or not? No. That's all about me. That adds no value to them at all. It doesn't even help them realize, why my product might help them or whatever. It just does nothing but asks for something from them, which is very ineffective. Sometimes, do it 1,000 times and, 1% of those will probably buy from you. I mean, great. But,
Right.
It's far more powerful to have reasons for people to remember you that are like useful to them. Maybe it's a, conversation we host on a podcast where they learn something new and they go, wow, that was interesting. Thanks, David. Now I come to mind whenever their buying window opens in a year from now and they need to buy my product, they go, that guy David, he's, I keep seeing him pop up. He keeps saying things that are really interesting that actually help me out. I want to do something for him. Maybe I'll buy his product. So.
Yeah, and some of that is conscious, but a lot of it is also subconscious, right? There's the reciprocity that comes to play, and it's not a negative thing. Like, we as humans want to feel a relationship with people that we do business with, and it's not all just emotional. And sometimes when we're talking about these things, it can be like, oh, well, that's not how business works, and we need everything to be like very transactional. And but the interesting thing is that trust is extremely important, because if that person trusts you that you're going to come through when something goes wrong, right, and your reputation is out there, they have a better feeling that you're going to actually take care of them, because they've heard you talk about the product. They know you're not going to try to sell them something that's not going to work for them, because you've talked about how this is a scenario where you wouldn't want to use radar that you're selling in this kind of a scenario, and they've heard you talk about that. So they know, if I'm going to ask David if his product's going to be a good fit, and it's not, he's going to tell me no, and then I'm not going to look like an idiot to my boss, where I ended up putting $1 million radar system which wasn't the right fit, right? So there's that level of trust that you're building over time that precedes you, and trust really is everything, especially in these enterprise deals, because there's so many different players that have to get involved, and there's so much going on, that people are not only thinking about, will this product work? They're also thinking about, how risky is it to work with this company? And will I end up losing my job because I was the person who brought the wrong vendor in for something? Or will I get a demotion? Or will I end up getting a raise because I brought the right person in at the right
Exactly.
time that was able to drive something forward.
100%. Yep. Yeah, I was going to say it's not all negative. They, but to your point, they can check off the risk factors before they even call you because of maybe seeing the content that you've been posting and having those touch points with you at a conference and then on a podcast and then whatever the case, and then they build that trust and they have those doubts. Perhaps they can check those off and then feel comfortable to call you. And then when you say, hey, actually our radar system is going to do exactly what you just described. Here's how, here's why. I've seen these, that happen, and give me, 10 other stories of exactly how that played out. Then they can trust you and they can implement it and feel good about it to your point, so.
Yeah. And my friend Bob Berg, I'm going to butcher his quote a little bit, but he says, all things being equal, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And so, there is a factor of like, okay, if your product isn't as good as somebody else's, you may or may not get that deal, right? But the other part of it is, mitigating risk, the trust factors, your knowledge, all of that adds trust. But then there's this layer of, hey, look, if I could choose between vendor A and vendor B, and they're basically the same, anything that you do that pushes you up over the edge is a massive advantage. And if that advantage is, I've been listening to David for the last 3 years talk about radar and drones and, the different things that are going on in my space, and he introduced me personally to somebody who hired me at their company, or he, ended up making an introduction to me to a different vendor that really came in clutch for me. That gives you a huge advantage versus the person who has a similar product, but they're just sending those one-line emails, right? So I'd love for you to share a little bit about the podcast and how that's helped. Because I know you're starting, it was kind of when you were starting out in this new space, you're going to a lot of conferences, and then we were talking a lot about it. I'm like, David, you got to start a show and start inviting people on. So tell me a little bit about what led you to decide, yeah, I'm going to do the podcast.
Totally. So just to tie the philosophy to it and then tell like the initial story here, if you can find ways and tools to reach out to somebody, as we said before, where you can make it about them, you can be intrigued by them and platform them. That's easier to get a yes from people, I've discovered, versus, hi, can I get something from you? Can I get some money from you to buy my product? So with that said, I've had instances where, like in the early days, you were encouraging me, you should just do it. You should just launch a show. And I had the old school philosophy of like, well, what am I going to talk about exactly? Like, I only have so much content, so many slide decks that I've, my company and I have put together that I could run through, to present my product. I can't do that. I can't have 100 episodes that talk all about my product. I could do 1 or 2,
right.
But how am I going to launch a show? How do I have enough to say? And in fact, I was newer in the industry 3 years ago, had shifted from more like security for like 10 years, cameras, access control, into more specifically into a nuanced element of it with radars on the radar manufacturer side. So, I was still learning. So to say, hey, I'm going to launch a show where I sit here and just share wisdom and knowledge when I'm the newer person here didn't quite resonate. I didn't know how to do it. Meanwhile, most people online, on LinkedIn, on my thread, quite a few people naturally just post one-way posts, meaning like, hi, look at me. We just announced, we just put out a new product line. It's awesome. Come look at it. Right. So it's a lot of times it's just like, here's knowledge about myself and my product, consume it. And so I didn't, anyways, I was like, I'm not the guy to do that. All that to say, I had a fellow that I was talking to, I met him at a conference, and it sounded like he might, there might be opportunity at some point in the future to buy my product. And I was excited about that. And then I kind of got salesy, and I was like, hey, are you still interested? Are you still interested? Are you going to buy my product? And eventually started getting ghosted, probably for about 2 months. I was like, shoot, how do I re-engage, or do something that's meaningful to them so that they actually respond to me, so I know they're still alive. And with that, I remembered your advice. And so before I learned even what to do and what software to use, how to get it all set up, I just was like, well, let me just give this a shot. So I sent like a one-line email like, hey, I heard you have a really awesome program, that I'd love to learn more about, actually, how you do things, versus like, can we meet so I can tell you more about my product? It was more just, can we meet so I can learn more about these amazing aspects of what you're doing? and do it, host you on a podcast. I kind of framed it that way. Like, I'd love to interview you on a podcast to learn more and let others listen and hear and learn from your expertise. And, after 2 months of ghosting, it was like 2 seconds after I sent that email, it was like a yes, and I was like, what?
I
Okay.
love it.
What do I do? So I called you, we got, StreamYard set up or whatever, and sent a link, jumped on. And even to this day, like, that episode has like 40 views or something on it, still, it's not like it's thousands and thousands of views, but I don't even think they were on camera. I mean, it was like just starting from the very beginning, and nothing was too eloquent or too crazy, but it re-engaged them, which, later led to them actually becoming a customer, and it led to opportunity for my product. But it was in that context of, hey, I actually just want to promote you, learn from you, and make a platform where other people can listen in and learn from your expertise as well. And I'll just facilitate that and ask, thoughtful questions along the way. And so that approach has become the norm now. And you can hear that's quite a different approach than the one-way billboard. I had a new product offering and I want to tell you all about it. Click here. Because
Yeah.
the views on those, the interaction on that type of media is really low. Where if it's a dialogue, a two-way dialogue, where people are learning new things and there's value being exchanged, and people can like write in questions while we're live, and it starts to become this really cool community synergy where we're all learning together, that gets so much more interaction, which is so much better if you're trying to sell things and do marketing. It's so much better if you're doing things that create lots of interaction. That makes sense.
Yep.
Two-way interaction versus a one-way billboard. We want to create actual dialogue where there's growth in thought and meaning. And then here's where my product actually fits into that puzzle, and people understand that very quickly at that point. So
Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, being live here, if anybody has a question, since we are live, you're welcome to hop in, because Dave and I are both here and we've been doing this for a little bit. So if you have a question or have a thought, throw it in the comments, and we'll chat about it live.
And I see some people that follow my podcast. Richard Reynolds, how are you doing, MD? And today, we're talking less about drones and radars and more about the philosophy on, marketing, sales, podcasting. So if you have questions on that, in that realm, we'd love to answer them. But go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. So one thing that I love about this, what you're sharing, and I think is really important, is you're not using, this isn't I mean, technically it's a strategy, but this isn't like a tactic. It's not a sales tactic, right? This is something that is helping you to build really deep relationships in your industry, and you have quickly gained authority and built great, meaningful relationships with people. And a lot of those people are never going to buy from you, and a lot of those people might not ever even be in a position where they could buy your product. But there's value, there's business value that comes from it, which if there wasn't, then it's like you're in sales, you'd have to be doing something different, right? But then there's also a lot of personal value that comes from that, and reputational value that comes from doing the show that you don't normally get. Because if you're doing cold outreach and you're just saying, hey, do you want to buy my product? And you're just constantly pitching people, well, yeah, you're going to make some sales eventually, probably. If your product is any good and people actually need it, then you're going to end up potentially getting some business coming from that. But as soon as you send that message, it either brings value to you or it doesn't, and then it's done. Whereas when you reach out to somebody, whether it's through a podcast or writing an article with them or inviting them to an event where they're going to get to meet other peers, whatever your tool is that you're using, when you focus on building those deep relationships with people as the foundation, then you're also getting that relational value. And I'll throw this in there also. It's just way more fun. Also, it's way more fun to spend time meeting people, talking to people, building relationships, helping people achieve what they're looking to in life, and then also getting business and getting business value from it, rather than it just being something where you're saying, hey, are you ready to buy from me? They say no, and then the relationship ends there.
Exactly. I love it. Actually, someone, I can't see who it is. I don't know if you can see on the thing, LinkedIn user and through here, but if you can see their name, you can shout it out. But they said, what are some non-sales benefits that you've gotten from the show, which you were just starting to allude to? And really, it comes down to like friendships. honestly that I've gained with amazing people like Michelle Duquette. Shout out. She said she loves that we're doing this as brothers. And there's yet another brother, by the way. There's 5 of us siblings all together. I'm one of 5. So you got Joe here, and then you've seen Josh, my brother, and then Ari pops in once in a while, and he's starting to get involved. And then Emily, of course, you'll probably see her. So anyways, you'll see us all over the Lewins.
I've gotten four out of 5 of the Lewins to start a show. I'm working on Ari still.
Well, and Ari's helping support on the back end right now, and learning. But anyways, so I shout out to Michelle because I, have grown just like an incredible friend and mentor and, a wise, wonderful lady in the industry that I might not have known. In fact, I remember Michelle when we were sitting at a pub somewhere. I was sitting with actually the guys from, I believe it was from Resilience. I was hanging out with Carter and the guys, and one of them was like, I was just talking about the podcast because it was very early days, and they were like, "Have you met Michelle Duquette?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And they pointed you out at the other table and made sure we shook hands, and that was kind of like the spark. I don't know, that was a couple of years ago, but just making incredible friends, that again, like mentor you and challenge you, encourage you. You learn from each other, you grow together. You said it; it's a lot more fun than just transactional sales. But it's just part of the human experience. It's part of what we were called to do as people, as humans on the earth, is to connect with each other and grow together, and honestly, like bring value to each other's life that can sometimes be the exchange of my product for your money, or vice versa, or whatever the case, right? So anyway, friendships would be like number one for sure for non-sales benefits. I mean, plenty of others in terms of like opportunities for being on other people's podcasts. Now I'm getting asked to be on panels at live events as well. Like I'm going to North Carolina to a whole drone conference, and I'm moderating one panel one day, and now I'm like sitting on another panel that I have a little more expertise in. And I've grown that expertise through the podcast, through listening, through asking questions, through hearing from brilliant people, and just taking notes and starting to form my own thoughts on it. And as I've grown, and then it's translated now into actual like real world, career boosting opportunities. And also, I can now promote my product when it makes sense on a much bigger scale. If I'm a person up on a panel in a live event, there's going to be more likely folks that want to talk to me afterwards versus if I'm just showing up as a vendor and trying to get people to buy from me again. It all kind of comes together.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll throw in there that's just a personal joy of mine that I get from running a show is getting to create opportunities for other people. And there's so much meaning that comes from that because I meet people all the time. And so, for instance, I had somebody reach out to me who helps people write books, and she's helping to ghostwrite books. And she reached out to me because she's like, "Oh, I see you launch a lot of podcasts. That's awesome." So we jumped on a call, and the authors that she's working with aren't in the right space. If they were, I'd love to get her authors on a bunch of shows, but they're in more like consumer facing space. But I start talking to her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm wanting to get people on these podcasts." She's explaining to me, and I'm like, "Oh, well, there's this other lady who I know who her whole business is helping people get on podcasts. So let me connect the two of you." They met, and then I talked to her a little bit more. I'm asking her about, "Well, how do you get books published?" And she's explaining it to me. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you've got to meet David Hancock. He's like the godfather of hybrid publishing, where you're able to still get authors into bookstores, and he's amazing at that. I think that you should talk to him and introduce them and their meeting." And so then, this is this young lady. She's just starting out in her career. She's focusing on doing ghostwriting, and just be able to connect her with these amazing people who are going to help her move forward in her career and help her, make these connections. And, that's helped happen with connecting people for job opportunities. And, actually, personally, I landed 2 jobs, each consecutively significantly better than the last one, that have been amazing, totally changed my career. Because in one case, I interviewed my future boss on my show. And then in the other case, I interviewed somebody who knew the guy that I'm working with right now. And he ended up making an introduction, and it turned into me getting to launch podcasts for companies. So lots of benefits that come that aren't just making
right
sales.
I love it, man. Well, yeah, I mean, I had one thing I wanted to bring up. Maybe I'll just throw it in there. I don't know what your next question was, but I just thought about this too, because a lot of people hide their strategy so much because they're afraid that their competitors are going to hear, what their strategy is by listening into their podcast if they talk about things related to their product or whatever, or their market. But I love the kind of Grant Cardone, comment that where he said, if you hide your strategy so much from your competitors, like what ends up happening is your own team, doesn't even know what your strategy is because it's all so
Mhm.
secretive. And so how effective is that really? But he said, if you flip it on its head and you burn a fire so big that your competitors come there to get warm, that's when you start to really win and the entire industry wins. It's like all the ships rise. And I've totally found that to be true because, I've actually had direct competitors multiple times reshare my videos and stuff, and like, it's kind of funny, but I'm like, well, it's must be, useful clips that are helpful and thoughtful to the industry that they thought was worth resharing to their network. And, maybe they win from that reshare. They get another touch point with someone that they want to sell to. Or maybe I win with, someone clicking through and then they come and find me, and whatever the case. It's like there's plenty of business out there, plenty of it. And it's really funny when you flip that on its head. But actually, that's a really hard adjustment to make. It really is. It's much easier to just keep everything super, tight lipped and essentially do nothing.
Yep.
That's a lot easier. That's a lot more comfortable. It's actually really hard when, like, if someone's out there listening and they're like, "Hey, yeah, this sounds great. I'm going to just start doing it." You're gonna, most likely gonna run into some of those philosophical blockers, which is like, well, what am I going to talk about on my show and how am I going to fill up all the space? But it's that shift of, well, what if your show's not completely about you? What if it's about other people you meet that are brilliant that you can highlight, which is what we were sharing earlier. Well, what if my competitors hear my strategy and that hurts me? It's like, look, just burn such a big fire, they come there to get warm and elevate the entire market. Make the entire market 3 times bigger or 10 times 10x 100x, and you get whatever percentage of that. Everyone
Yeah.
wins, right? So
Yeah. And I want to get your advice in just a second on if people are thinking about starting a podcast or they're in sales and they're going, hey, maybe this is a good idea. So I want to get into that in a second. But I wanted to make a comment on what you just said. Not only when you burn the fire and your competitors are coming, does it grow the industry, but also a lot of times your competitors have a weakness and so do you. And so when they learn about you and your product and where it's going to be a good fit, they might recommend you. And that happens all the time where it's like, hey, our product actually isn't going to be the right fit for this reason. But hey, there's this guy I know, David Lewin, he runs the show. Check him out. And that happens also. And so when you're totally afraid and you're trying to keep everything close, and I think it's in the same vein, something that I found about running a show and focusing on building relationships. And, I think the caveat to this is you said those people who just go out and network. So the caveat is building strategic business relationships with people that you could see business value coming from that. Otherwise, you're going to starve. Whether you're running a business or you're in sales, you have to be strategic about who you're building relationships with. And that's good for them. It's good for you. There's a win-win out of that. So if you're being strategic about the business relationships that you're building, what I found is that you end up building relationships with the key players who all know each other, and you're going to get much better quality business from that. Because when you're doing the transactional stuff, the primary people you're going to be able to reach and get in front of are people who are also very transactional, not people who are really relational. And they become the most difficult clients to work with. They're the ones who are going to try to get you to cut your prices all the time. They're going to try to nickel and dime you. They're going to try to cut corners. They're going to try to cut you out of deals when it's convenient for them. And so people who take a very transactional approach, they don't have friends in the industry. And so all they can do is wait for the sales guy to reach out or go to Google or, fill out a download. Whereas the people who are really have built strong community and strong relationships in their industry, they're first going to go to their peers and they're going to go, hey, who do you know who's dealing with a problem like this? And what did they do? And when you're in that circle, whether it's through a podcast or you're at events or whatever the case is, it really sets you up in a position to be able to get the business that's really high quality and not just kind of the leftovers for the people who haven't built those great relationships.
big time. I want to say this too. It's the one who is just transactional will forever be seen as a vendor per se, and so if you're just a vendor, then how can I get a deal from you? And also, I'm not going to send you to my friends. Like, I'm going to send a vendor who I know is going to have that commission breath and all that negativity, that's just going to like pound them and ask them for the deal and ask them for the deal and be annoying and offer no value. Why would I risk my social currency, my relationships by being like, oh, go talk to this guy for sure. I'm going to give them
Yep.
all my friends' numbers and and whatever. It's the opposite. It's like, hey, watch out, just buy the thing from them, but you get a reputation, actually a negative reputation, pretty quickly too. Just like that you have to work with them. They're the only one that makes that product today. Hopefully there'll be a competitor soon that can replace them. But for now you have to, but man, watch out, right? You almost get into that realm, which is not where we want to be. I read a really good book that, essentially gives like this framework. It says, you want to start the relationship at the highest level of value and then work kind of backwards. So a lot of a lot of folks, someone laughed at commission breath, but in the comments there, yeah. But a lot of folks who are in sales, maybe newer at it, start out as that vendor. They just like pound the phones or whatever and just go, try to close deals. But the problem is you're starting at the lowest level of value, where like that is a level that if you don't want to starve, eventually, you need to be able to bring conversation sort of downwards in the spectrum towards, hey, I have a product, do you want to buy it? Like, yes, eventually you need to know actually how to get the conversation eventually towards that, or at least like check, hey, are you interested in going this direction? No? Okay, that's fine. Yes, okay, great. Well, I'm glad we met then, because I think I could really help you. Great. But if you start there, you can't go up into higher levels of value as easily. Like, it's very hard to start as a vendor in someone's mind and then somehow now become this great, helpful advisor. Whereas if you flip the script on that and you start on the complete other side of the spectrum at a much higher level of value, where you're saying, hey, do you want to come on my podcast where you can be promoted and highlighted and your thoughts can be, heard by many others and they can learn from you. Now you just added a tremendous amount of value to their life, to their career. You offered them something, you gave them something that, was meaningful to them. And now you started there in their mind as someone that, is a friend, an advisor to them, etc. Someone that helped them out. Then you can, if it makes sense, you can progress, the other direction as needed towards products and whatnot. But I just thought that kind of thought of like, where are you entering, what level of value are you initiating this relationship with? You can always kind of work downward, but you can't ever very easily get out of that vendor category once you're in it.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute perspective on that, and I agree. I mean, that happens when you're working at a job too, right? If you come in an entry level position, you can eventually work your way up, but it's very difficult for somebody who's much further up the chain to take your ideas seriously. But then you could end up getting a role that's equal to that person a week later, share the exact same idea, and somebody's going to take you so much more seriously because you're starting at that level of value and they haven't seen you as being this low level person that's trying to give you advice. You're seen as a peer, right? And that's another thing that's amazing about the podcast, is that you build authority and people start seeing you as a peer in their industry, even if you're not, and I've actually had multiple times where I've hosted shows that I know nothing about the industry at all, and I'm able to talk competently and people start seeing me as knowing what I'm talking about, even if I don't, right? So there's kind of this hidden value there of being able to really quickly build authority, and then you learn, right? And you actually, that's another one of the kind of hidden values, is you're meeting all these amazing people who are super smart and have great ideas, and you're getting really good at pulling those ideas out. And now you actually do really quickly become an authority in the space because you know everybody, so you're able to make the connections, and then you start really quickly learning from the top people in the industry exactly what they're doing. And so you're able to sometimes learn 10, 15 years worth of information in a couple years because you're talking to all the right people who are doing cutting edge stuff, right? But I want to transition here because
I just want to use a phrase here for people to walk away with, which is credibility by association, right? Is kind of what you just described. Maybe a little bit of a jargony way to say it, but it's a nice way to sum that up. You grow in credibility in the market by who you're associated with as well.
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to transition here for the last couple minutes to talk about for people who go, I'm kind of on the fence, maybe they're where you were before, where you're going, I have to have something to say. And I'd like you to address a couple things because it's stuff that I hear come up all the time when I'm talking with people about launching a show. So one of those is I don't have anything to say, which you kind of already addressed, but you could talk about that again. The other one is like, this is going to take so much time. I don't have time to do something like that. It's just all consuming, and I don't have the time or bandwidth to do it. And then another one is, just people being afraid of putting themselves out there online, right? Even on LinkedIn, they're afraid maybe their company might have an issue with it, or they're afraid of what other people might think of them or whatever. So those are three really major things that I find people say when they're going to launch a show. So what's your encouragement to people who are on the fence?
Well, it depends on what your job is, I suppose. But if you're in enterprise sales, if you're trying to scale and sell something that has value, then I think you can't afford to not invest the time into something like this, like doing a podcast, where it just puts networking with many people on steroids. It's exponential networking. It would be impossible for me to be many times quota or whatever this year if I wasn't out in front of thousands of people at this point, versus just like how many people can I email and call in one day, compared to weekly cadence where 500 to 1,000 people over time as a video's up end up watching each episode. That's quite a few people. And then you combine that with in-person events, which is maybe unique to me, but I think there's others out there that also go to 1, 2, 3 tabletop type events each month. Where there's this flywheel effect between the virtual and the in-person. That's incredible. Where maybe I'm going to like a maritime port security conference or something like very niche, like maybe the folks that go there don't know who I am or haven't seen my episodes or whatever, right? But what if, and I do this all the time, the week before the show, 2 weeks before the show, we invite one of the key speakers or even the person who put on the conference and other folks to join the panel with me. And I forgot to say it earlier, but Michelle Duquette, not only friend, but she's one of my main co-hosts, that has just stuck with me for, I don't know, a year now or something like that on the podcast. So thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate it. But so Michelle and I will put our heads together and be like, hey, let's invite that person who's leading that, whatever it is, and they'll jump on the show. We're now highlighting them or promoting their event. Now again, it's like adding value to them. More people now know what they're doing and who they are, and they get people to register and pay for their, to go to their show. They win. But then guess who's watching, who wants to jump on and listen to what they have to say? It's going to be, maybe tens or maybe hundreds of the people that are going to that event that will be there in person, that I'm going to the next week, where I'm going to be standing at a booth with my brand and all that. And people now, because of that sort of mentality, and being that niche, that strategic about it, like, hey, this conference is coming up. I'm going to actually bring people on related to that this week. And then maybe the next week it's like a slight adjustment. Then I constantly have people walking up to me that I don't know. Every single event I go to, at least one, if not a handful of people that I've never met, that I don't recognize necessarily, because you only see their little icon on LinkedIn and their face isn't even in it half the time or whatever. It's an American flag or something. You're like, how would I recognize you? But, but people are like, David, hey, it's me, and because maybe they're all up in the comments on all my stuff, and it's so fun and it's amazing. And it's so I couldn't afford to stop doing it and actually accelerate sales on this level. That would be impossible. And it really is doubling down on, as a sales rep, what I'm here to do, what my role is meant to be. I'm a regional sales manager. I'm that outside sales rep. Go create new business, to be clear. In that role, like, there's nothing more effective and more important than having, conversations with hundreds or even thousands of the right ideal customer profile over and over and over every single week, every single day. And actually having fun while you're doing it, building tons of credibility while you're doing it. And it's crazy. It's on steroids. I'd be at like 10% effectiveness compared to where I am right now or something, or half, at least. I'd be like half as effective in my day job easily if I just cold stopped doing this and just went to just straight up, dial people on the phone all day.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've been talking about a lot more recently with people when they're getting ready to start the show, is you can't think of this as being something in addition to what you're already doing. what are some business development things that you're already doing? Because you're probably doing something. This is only extra if you're not doing any business development at all. But if you're sending cold emails or you're interacting with people and posting on LinkedIn and you're hoping to get something from that, you could take an hour and a half a week and out of that time that you're already doing something else to guarantee upfront that you're going to be talking to exactly the right kind of person. And then over time, when you do that, you're also going to grow an audience of exactly the right kind of people on an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours on the high end a week. And so, it's really just like you said, it's not saying, hey, I'm going to do all of these extra things. It's I'm going to take some of the things I'm doing that aren't working and put that attention into here, and then maybe supplement with some of this other stuff on the back end if you have to keep doing it to keep your boss happy. But it's so much more effective. I mean, in fact, I launched a show with somebody over the last couple of weeks, and he's reached out to like 1,500 people and gotten tons of people already. He's already recorded like 20 something interviews in his first 35 days. And he had actually said that he spent 2 months cold emailing people and booked 0 meetings. And he's already in less than a month of running, in less than 30 days, he'd already closed a deal with somebody who the deal had gone, kind of similar to your original story. The deal had gone south. It wasn't really moving forward. And then he re-engaged the guy. The guy came on a show and then ended up, buying from him in less than 30 days of starting the show. And so, part of it is the long game. Part of it is that trust and reputation building. But in your case and in his case and in my case, all of us close business extremely quickly, like unrealistically quickly by doing this too. So it can give you that short-term revenue bump that is possible if you're going to treat it as business development and you're going to really reach out to a lot of people. But then you also get all of those long-term relational benefits, trust benefits, people coming to you at the trade booth rather than, I created this graphic a while ago where there's somebody who's trying to break into a conversation at an event. And, you're on the outside and you're trying to I've done that, but I'm sure we've all done that, right? Where you step into a crowd of people and you're like, hey, my name's Joseph, how's it going? But it's so much better if you have a line of people who are waiting to talk to you when you're at the event. And if you speak, if you do podcasting, if you, do stuff like that, you're going to have people who come to you, and that's a much better position to be in.
100%. And to your point about how strategic you can be with your time, I totally agree. Think about this: how many Zoom calls or Teams calls or Google Meets calls do you have in a given, say, day? Hopefully a handful if you're in sales, right? And a lot of times with this, you just pick one of those once a week to stream live. That's all you're doing. You're just streaming one of your Zoom calls live. That was with a consultant in the industry, with an end user, with another manufacturer, with someone who's hosting an event you're going to. You name it. There's all kinds of folks that could be on there that you could have just had a discovery call with privately. And of course, in private, you can go a little deeper about certain things and, get into like the money side of the, other things you might not share live. But guess when that happens? That happens just before you hit go live, when you're getting your mics and cameras ready. Or that happens when you end the live show after an hour and you all go, hey, how did that go? Great. And you'd be surprised. In fact, we just did one. Michelle and I did one together yesterday, and that happened. We closed out the live. We bantered a little bit behind the scenes, and there was a connection. One of the folks that we had invited was like, wait, you do that, Michelle? Yeah, I do. Well, man, we need to get, shoot me an email. Let's follow up on that. I want you to be part of that, and it was an actual connection and a next step and something that, whatever it was, I didn't follow it. But anyways, that happens all the time. Point being, it doesn't have to become this, oh man, I'm launching a podcast. It's going to take, so much time, so much money. It's totally the inverse. This is literally just, now you have a meaningful reason to reach back out to a bunch of people that are cold or whatever, or that you've never met, that they're going to say yes to almost instantly, right? Hey, do you want to jump on this pod? Can I interview you? And, you want to be on a panel about this topic that you're an expert in? Like, no one's going to hate you for that. Like, worst case, you send 10 of those and 6 of them go, oh man, I just saw this and I couldn't make it. I'm so sorry, but next time around, please think of me. I mean, that's like worst case, I mean, and now that was a touch point. That was meaningful. They weren't even on, but now you're top of mind. If they get to the point where like, you know what, I actually could use some radar. Dude, that guy David, he just asked me to be on a podcast and I feel bad I couldn't be on it. I should call him, I mean,
Yep.
so it's amazing. It's so effective. So now, if you're in sales, you're supposed to be doing those outreaches. Well, now you just have another tool and a much more powerful, meaningful way to get a quote unquote, sort of touch point. And you need what, like 15 or 20 of those or something, whatever the stats are for someone to buy. So this just gives you a good, 10 reasons to reach out to them over the next year that are thoughtful and meaningful and useful to them. So to your point, it's not extra time. Those are touch points I was supposed to be making anyway, according to my job description. So now I just got to do it
Right.
in a much more fun, effective, meaningful way. And then you're hosting discovery calls and Zoom calls all day anyway. Might as well just stream one of them live once a week and let other people listen in and benefit from it. That's literally all it has to be.
And I could tell you, and we'll wrap up here because we could keep chatting about this all day. But another aspect of this I think is kind of cool is, for one, you invite somebody on a show, you're reaching out to them. That's one touch point. Then you're coordinating the show. That's another touch point. Then they're coming on the show. That's another touch point. And then you're probably going to follow up with something after that, even if it's just, hey, thanks for coming on the show. That's another touch point. That's a lot of extra interactions that you're having with that person. And sometimes it could be over the course of a month or two, right? And so you're filling up these touch points with somebody and building that warm connection multiple times while they're coming on the show. And then, for a lot of people starting out, I don't always recommend that they're spending a lot of time on clips and stuff like that and posting, because that does get to be more time consuming. But when you get into that, now you're sending them clips ahead of time and then they're posting it on their channel. And now, your touch points are going even further. So that one call that you're skipping, or, whatever, that one call that you're live streaming, like you're saying, not skipping, now that's turning into like potentially 10 touch points with that one person or more, and getting touch points in their network. And then the last thing I'll say that I find really cool about this is, um, typically if you're going to cold call somebody or cold email somebody, they either buy or they don't. I mentioned that earlier. What typically isn't going to happen is they go, you know what? Thanks for sending me this LinkedIn message about your product. I don't need it, but let me introduce you to a friend of mine who does. I've never seen that happen. I'm sure in, the sales guy's going to go, oh, I've had that happen. Okay, like once out of 10,000 times. Okay. Um, Whereas when you have somebody on a show, if they're not in market or they're not a customer, there's a very good chance that they're going to refer somebody to you. And I've actually at this point gotten as much or more business from people I've had on my show who end up referring me to work with other people, and they refer me into their network. And so what kind of discovery call are you going to hop on where that person goes, hey, this isn't a good fit for me, but here's somebody else? That's almost never going to happen, right? But I've had that happen on the show all the time. Like, that is a regular occurrence with people who come on the show, is to get those referrals like that.
Yeah, and it's that reciprocity. It's them going, "Thanks, Joe. Thanks, David. This was meaningful. This was awesome. Thank you for helping me. How can I help you?" It's just natural, right? And you don't even have to get too weird about it. Just that's just going to happen. Like, and then you can just enjoy serving other people. The longer you do it, the more you're in this mentality, the more that you get that flywheel, and you got enough business coming in on one side of the funnel, and then you can just focus on building meaningful and deep relationships with ideal customer profile type folks, within a good, have a strategy about who you're reaching out to. But if they're in a bucket where, hey, they could eventually buy, or they could refer me to somebody, and anyway, you can just, it's great. You could focus more and more of your time on just serving and blessing and being, a help and a light to other people. And eventually the market catches up on that level of value that you're inputting. Eventually your income matches that level of value. And that's, I've heard that before in my career, and then now after a couple of years of really doubling down this, I've seen that I'm getting that income starts to match that level of value, and then that's a great spot to be in, right? I
That's
mean,
great because you get
when
the
you're starting
income
out, yeah,
and the fun of being able to
yeah, but
serve
like
and help other
when you're
people.
starting out though, or maybe you jump into a new product or a new market or whatever, like we all have to kind of reset and restart for different reasons, multiple times. But when you're kind of in that restart, it's hard to believe that sometimes, because all you see is just like the empty pipeline and the number of transactions you need to have. But if you can, when I tried early on, as early as possible, to start to embrace that faith, that belief that, like, what, I'm not seeing the income side yet, but I'm just going to dump in the value part of the, deal, and then believe that is eventually going to catch up my income. And, it really helps, because then, you can just start to act like we were talking about early before, you can start to just sort of act like money's not a problem. You can lose that commission breath that we mentioned earlier that someone laughed about in the comments, earlier on in your career, if you start to just embrace the wisdom that we're sharing even before you've experienced it.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the best questions, if you don't want to be salesy after the show, which usually doesn't work out that well anyway, like in certain circumstances, the person needs what you have. It's a great fit. You finish the show and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to talk because I think we can really help you with that. Like sometimes that happens and that's great when it does, but that's the exception. And if you try to lead in with that all the time, you're just going to, it's a Trojan horse and they're going to see that and nobody's going to come on your show anymore. But a great way to end your show after you're done is just to go, man, this is awesome. How can I help you? What are you trying to do? And then they're going to tell you. And if they have something you can help them, you introduce them to somebody awesome. Or if what they need is something you can help with, you go, actually, that's what I do for work. Why do we schedule another? Would it make sense for us to schedule another call and talk about it? Yeah, let's do that. Right. Or they go, no, I don't need anything. And then what's the next thing they're going to say? How can I help you? And then that gives you the opportunity to think about what you need. And maybe it's an introduction to somebody. Maybe it's, hey, this is what I do. Do you know anybody who would be a good fit? Maybe it's, hey, I'm trying to get more people like you on my show. Do you know of anybody who would be a good guest? And then, you've already added value wherever you can. And then a lot of times people are just going to offer that value right back to you, and it moves along great. So anyway, we could continue going, but David, this is super fun having you on. You're one of the first people who I helped to get a show of your own off the ground. And you've been by far the most successful person I've worked with on every level. So it's super fun. I tell stories about the stuff that you're doing and how effective it is all the time. So it was super fun to jump on and really dig into it. How can people find out more about you and This Week in Drones and everything you're doing over on your side?
Well, for sure. And before I share that, I just want to say thank you. And I want to point people your way because Joe helps others start podcasts like what I started with This Week in Drones. He taught me everything I know and has programs and courses and consulting to elevate folks, so if you're out there and you want to give it a shot, give Joe a call for sure. And otherwise, yeah, just find me on LinkedIn, David Lewin, or look up This Week in Drones and we can collaborate. I'd love to connect. And, maybe I'll see you guys at one of the big events coming up in security or, something involved there. But yeah, love to help out however I can.
Awesome. Thanks again, David. Really appreciate you coming on the show. And thanks everybody for joining us live. And we'll see you guys again next time.